for being here. What time is of the essence today? I know that some folks just left a meeting, and I know we've got another one on the heels of this one at 4 o'clock. I don't anticipate from the agenda that we're going to have a problem meeting that deadline, but we need to make sure that we're there. I'd like to call the order of the Kentucky Community and Technical College System Board of Regents Audit Committee. As you've heard me say many times, the most important committee of the board to order. I'd like to ask Ms. Young, parliamentarian, to please call the roll.
Chair Cox.
Here.
Vice Chair Hamilton. Regent Girdler.
Here.
Regent Heerdink is no longer on the board, and there will be a staff election to fill the vacancy. Regent McGraw.
Here. Hello. Sorry.
Regent Schaus.
Here.
Regent Stevens.
Here.
Regent Sutherland.
Here.
And Regent Martin.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So we need to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was on May 31st, which seems like an eternity ago. Are there any corrections to the meeting minutes? If not, may I have a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Thank you. A second? I can wait for a second, or someone can just say a second.
I'll second.
Yeah, that's a boy. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Parliamentarian Young, can you conduct this vote by show of hands? Are we okay that way?
Yes. Are there any objections? Okay.
Like an objection?
Motion passes.
Thank you. Before we jump into this, I would like to ask our new Chief Financial Officer, Todd Kilburn, if you would introduce yourself. Welcome to our wonderful organization. Welcome to our committee. We're excited by your presence, but tell us a little bit about yourself, and obviously you're going to play an important role in this committee going forward.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm excited to be here. I've worked in a number of different places, but probably the most recent and most relevant was I served as the Chief Financial Officer for the Idaho State Board of Education. It was a system that handled for four-year institutions, for community colleges, the K-12 system, and Idaho Public TV. None of us knew why we handled Idaho Public TV, but we did. And so I've worked on both sides of the college office aisle. And so I've been in the seat of the chief financial officers at the schools. I've also been in the seat at a system office. And very excited to be here, excited to be in Kentucky, and love working with Dr. Quarles and the team. Got a great group of people here. And so thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. We're glad to have you here, as I said. And, you know, the good news is there's plenty to do. I will assure you won't be bored for a long time.
I am already finding that out, Mr. Chair.
So while you're on the camera and while you're on a roll here, Todd, if you would please go ahead and provide us with an update on the internal audit for FY 23-24 quarter 4.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in conversations, as I've been meeting people, I had the privilege of meeting with Lance and Jody from Dean Dorton, and to talk through both the internal audit for this last year and the planned internal audit for next year, which will be our next agenda item. We've been talking through some of those items, working through some of them back and forth. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the folks at Dean Dorton to talk us through what they've brought to report today.
Thank you, Todd. So I think I know most people, but Lance Mann, Director at Dean Dorton, and Internal Audit Director for KCTCS. I've got with me Jody Wren, who is the Associate Director on the audit engagement and really handles most of the day-to-day. So if we have a detailed question, Jody is here to save me and make sure that we've got a detailed answer for you. I'll go through the Q4 report, and then we can go through the audit plan for FY25 after everybody has that. If you have a question as I'm going through it, please let me know. You don't have to wait till the end. Bring it up while I'm on the page. But we are very grateful to get to work with KCTCS and the Board of Regents. I'm going to share my screen if it will allow me to. It looks like it's gonna. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So this is the executive summary. As you can see here, we finished a variety of audits in 7 areas during this quarter. The biggest one was probably the disaster response and active shooter preparedness plan, and we'll talk about some of that. And that was system-wide. We did an audit over month-end close and reconciliation process at the system office, a whistleblower audit, fixed asset audit, policies and procedures process review. So the process for developing and maintaining and updating policies and procedures. We also worked on the FY25 risk assessment and internal audit plan, which we'll talk about later, and then a variety of IT controls testing, which we'll also talk about. The good news to start, everybody wants good news, is we had no high risk issues or findings, nothing that we thought rose to the level of being high risk. We've got some moderate risk issues in the disaster response and active shooter review area and the policies and procedures area, and one in the IT key control testing. We've got some low risk issues and some other observations. I don't plan to read all of them to you, but I will go through each of these audit areas to kind of give you a high level overview of what the findings are. But you can also see management has responded to these findings and issues. In the disaster response area, our primary job on this audit was to review if individual colleges were adhering to the policies and procedures over disaster responses and active shooters that the system has put out at each college. We do have some strength in each audit. For those who haven't seen an internal audit report from us before, all colleges did have a policy and procedure in place for this, and they do have some form of security to lock down the buildings that they have. Those are very positive things. They have all thought about it, and they have all done something about it. I'm not going to read all of the findings to you, but what I can tell you is the general trend in the findings here is there is differences in how each campus is handling active shooter and disaster response. And each campus, each college believes that there's improvements that could occur. It could be around their ability to secure doors. Some of them were their ability to have good cameras around campus so that they can monitor what's going on around campus. There, at one of the campuses, there had been a number of requests that had come in for certain increases that they hadn't had a chance to evaluate whether or not these should be improved. There were some colleges that expressed a concern that they didn't have enough security staff to really execute on the plan that they had in place in the event of a disaster or an active shooter. What I can tell you is the KCTCS management team is taking our report seriously, and they do have the Director of Safety and Emergency Services who has plans in place over the next 12 months or less to evaluate these and work with each of the individual colleges to determine if investments are required, if personnel are required, or if capital improvements are required. What I do tell all of my clients is just because I tell you that there's a finding doesn't mean that you have to fix it. I'm just telling you the risks. You all have to decide if you want to accept those risks or if you want to respond to those risks.
Lance, could you go back a page before we get off of that?
Yes, right.
Back here. Yeah, no, move ahead one now.
Yes, sir.
The strengths identified, all the colleges have a form of security to lock down buildings. That's an incredible strength. I'm not saying it's not true, but there's a lot of buildings on all of our campuses, and all of those buildings have some form of security that allows us to lock down the buildings. Is that automated, or, I mean, that's amazing.
So So they have form of security to lock down buildings. I didn't necessarily say every single building on every single campus, but they all have a process in place for the most significant buildings.
Okay. Okay.
There were
That
some
answers-
issues with some doors. There was some issue with some cameras and some issues with some personnel at various campuses. But by and large, they've taken they've risk assessed their own campus and started to work down the riskiest areas and started working their way down,
Okay.
which is an appropriate way to do it.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions on this audit before I would encourage y'all to go through the details of the audit and read management's response and make sure that you all as an audit committee are comfortable with their responses.
I would agree.
And we will follow up. We give them the time period that they've committed to. So after June of 25, we will follow up to make sure that management has done what they said they were going to do and update the report and update you all on what they've done.
Yeah, I think this is a very key page or a very key study that we need to entrust President Quarles on. At least my opinion of this is that, you know, whatever we need to do to ensure the safety and ensure that they have the proper tools and the proper investment, because this is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And we just hope that it is to a minor degree and that we're, you know, very prepared from this perspective, because I can tell you from my industry's perspective, there are more and more hospitals that are experiencing these types of things in some form or fashion. And, you know, we've done a lot of the same sorts of things, but it's a constantly evolving responsibility to take a look at what you're doing, how prepared you are as turnover happens, how trained people are. This is an important thing.
Mr. Chairman, it's also worth noting that we have well over 300 buildings across Kentucky, and they're not made equally. And you just got to stop and think about maybe some of the technical programs. These are big bay doors that they're not the doors that maybe a lot of us are used to working with, or ingress points in our own work environments. And so we are having what we're calling a safety conference, but Todd's working on that in the coming weeks, where this will be addressed system-wide as well and reinforced.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. And what I can tell you, Chair Cox, is Dean Dorton, even in our offices, actually just went through the process at all of our office spaces, looking at security, active shooter training, and preparedness in the event of an issue.
Right.
So for a less maybe heavy audit, we did an audit over month-end reconciliation, and we had no observations or findings. Your team in the accounting department does a great job of making sure reconciliations are done timely and accurately. But it's something that you want to make sure they're doing periodically, because if they're not, issues could arise very quickly. Another area that was on the risk assessment for this year for us to audit was really around doing an audit to determine if there's adherence to policies and procedures covering whistleblower policy, and also making sure that there's general knowledge about your whistleblower hotline across various campuses. What I can tell you, because we operate some whistleblower hotlines for colleges, is it's typically that most team members don't even know you have one, or that that's an option. And so we performed a variety of procedures here. You do have good policies and procedures in place over the whistleblower hotline. You've got people assigned who are required to respond to any call that comes in or some online report that comes in. We do have a few small things here. There's a significant gap in awareness that you have one. What I tell most of the colleges and entities that we manage them for, you should probably, you've got posters, you probably have something on some emails, but you should probably have a communication once a year to remind everybody that you have it and how to access it. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or formal, but it should be intentional. Most colleges have passive information sharing about the whistleblower hotline. I recommend at least one very intentional active communication per year. And those are the main things. We had 3 different recommendations here about what they could be doing here, and management has responded. Human Resources is planning to have any additional improvements made by this fall. On the fixed asset audit, this was to review the existence and insurance valuation over fixed assets, over a sample of fixed assets. We performed a variety of procedures. We did not have any specific findings. We did have a small other observation here, right here, just around addressing how the insurance coverage is provided and ensuring that adequate insurance is there. It's not an actual finding, it's just an observation for management to consider. The policies and procedures review was very interesting. So the charge we had was KCTCS has a lot of policies and procedures. Can you come in and audit to see, are they consistently written? Do we have somewhere to find them all? Are we reviewing and updating them periodically and making sure that they're up to date with whatever the new rules may be, or just up to date with what modern policies and procedures should be? We did have some good strengths here. We didn't notice any major policy omissions, which is fantastic. You do have a central repository for your policies, and you do have policies and procedures in place that impact the entire system for KCTCS. But we do have some findings, and we expected to. You all are not unlike other institutions. There were a significant number of policies that had not been reviewed or updated for many years. We're not telling you have to change every policy every year, but you should have a process in place for at least saying, yep, that's still a good policy. We still like it. We don't need to update it. Or yes, we need to tweak a few things here. And so there were 86 policies and procedures that have current effective dates that are greater than or equal to 10 years. And so we just recommend going back, creating a process for reviewing all those and making sure that, yeah, these are still policies and procedures we want to have, and they're up to date. The other part that we found was that the way policies and procedures were written were inconsistent. Not that we think everything has to be perfectly consistent all the time, but it does make a more efficient system if your policies and procedures are written in a consistent format so that people can read and understand them and know what parts of them impact their roles. So we just recommended some improvements in that area. And then finally, the current policy development and review process was kind of characterized with excessive delays by stakeholders reporting that it could take several months to over a year for a policy to be finalized and published. I don't think you're going to fix this one overnight, but it's good just to have somebody who's in charge of these to make sure that it's still moving through the process, and to have a tracking system to make sure that there's somebody tracking these types of things and looking for delays or issues that are happening. There was one issue around, there was not a formalized structure over, who's in charge of policies, who's in charge of making it done, kind of consistent with other findings. It's got to be somebody's job. Somebody's got to own it. Somebody's got to be in charge of this area, is what that means. There is a policy administrator who has responded to these and is planning to have improvements made over the next, some earlier, some later, but over the next 18 months. This isn't something you can fix overnight. You do have to work to get processes in place, possibly some technology expenditures, depending on what you already have in place. And so we did review the policy library, and it did seem not the most user-friendly. This is a long way of saying it wasn't a user-friendly policy library, and so whomever's in charge of that should be looking at that to try to make it easier for team members at KCTCS to access what they need at a given time. Any questions on that?
Not
Yes,
a question, but a comment. We love when auditors help us, guide us, and help identify weaknesses. And this is an area that we have ramped up particularly not just with our cabinet, but also as recently as this week with our 16 presidents, that we have been told that the majority of our policies are outdated. Okay. Now what's next? And so Mallory, our new compliance officer, has already started with, as you suggested, with coming up with a policy on policies. Because another thing that we hear is that certain policy recommendations go to stakeholder groups and they never come back, and we don't hear about them, and then there's not a tracking of it, and then next thing you know, a year has passed. And so we'll be presenting to the PLT next month a policy on policy that actually puts a step-by-step procedure in policy review. This is great work. There's a lot ahead of us. It's kind of like working in triage, that we have to decide which one's first and the severity of that. So this is great work, and we appreciate your findings. It's very timely.
If I could make one informal recommendation for maybe Mallory or the president is leverage your audit committee chair. There's nobody better at policies and procedures than hospitals with the nursing policies they have to have in place. And they have technology, they have processes, so they may have some good best practices you could take away to KCTCS.
Unfortunately, you're right. And we're so regulated and governed by accreditation bodies that we're forced to be there. But yeah, we've definitely got a policy on policies. I'll be glad to help any way you need.
And I think Regent McGraw has her hand up.
I do. Thank you. I just wanted to also offer up, we went through this. There's folks out there that are getting master's degrees in policy administration. We hired a few of those folks as interns that came in and helped us sort of clean up all our policies, get them in order. So it might be something that you would want to consider doing and supplementing your team with some of these interns for a while.
Thank you.
So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to take this opportunity. Mallory has joined us. If she would like to introduce herself, she's been a wonderful new addition. She is our Executive Director of Risk Management and Compliance.
Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. My name is Mallory Yeaman, and I have joined as of June, and I'm the one working on this project.
If we can help, please let us know, Mallory. And by we, I mean Jody, because she's going to be far better at it than I am.
Jody is great. I enjoy working with Jody already.
Good. All right.
Good.
And then in the IT space, you can see here, we did some IT control testing in 4 areas. Excuse me. Limit privileged access to certain systems and data to authorized transactions. We gain an understanding of new vulnerability scanning and management to document controls, protection of physical media, so physical storage devices, and the how you all screen individuals prior to authorizing access to certain systems. We've got one moderate risk finding here. Sorry, Dr. Quarles, but it was giving access to certain data before certain things weren't filled out related to giving access to computers and systems and things like that. So not necessarily related to Dr. Quarles, but really related to in the future, as you have new team members coming on, make sure you've got the right documentation in place for them. Hopefully I didn't miss anything there, Chris. I mentioned earlier that one of the things we do is follow up on prior audit findings. And we keep a running list to know what's open, what's in progress, is there anything late. During this quarter, there were 3 due to be complete, and all 3 of those were complete. I'm not going to go through and read them all to you, but they are all on the following pages. So you can see what was the finding, what was the response, and what was the date, and you can see the future dates when things are going to come due for us to be looking at. And then finally, this was our plan for fiscal year 24. We've completed almost the entire plan. We've got some areas of student financial aid that have carried forward. For those on the call who may not have heard, there was a small issue with the FAFSA this year. I'm I'm being a little dramatic when I say small. It was the most
Yes, you
significant
are.
issue with student financial aid in probably the last 20 years. And so we decided not to disrupt the student financial aid team this fall and during the summer. And the IT space, we finished all of the different IT audits. Any questions on our Q4 report?
Any questions? Great. Thank you very much, Lance.
Are you ready for me to go through the plan for fiscal 25, or do you want to vote on this thing first?
I think we can let you do that and then vote on it. Is that correct, Parliamentarian Young?
Yes.
Let's do that.
All right. So I've got a lot of pages about how we developed this plan that I'm not necessarily going to read to you, but I'll kind of walk you through it. We review a significant amount of information related to KCTCS, financial reports, ethics hotlines, any big changes that are occurring, board minutes. We attend a couple of board meetings. And all the various data that we get gives us probably 10% of what we need to develop an internal audit plan from reviewing data. And then we get about another 20% from what we know is going on in the higher education industry, just risks we're aware of. We've got a higher education team at Dean Dorton that keeps abreast. We go to conferences. We kind of know some of the risks that are occurring in the higher ed space. We probably get another 20% from there. And then we interview, I'm going to guess, somewhere around 40 different people within KCTCS, people from each college, and every single department within the system office. And we also interview a variety of board members. And that gives us really the 70%, because the people who are doing the work really know where the risks exist within the organization. And so that, it takes me a long time. I could read and tell you why internal audit's important. I think you all already know that. Excuse me. We've got a variety of team members that work on the KCTCS audit throughout the year. You all have been through the audit cycle before. And then this is some about the process of us developing it. One thing new we added this year with KCTCS having what I'll call now a complete senior leadership team. Congratulations to you all now having a complete senior leadership team. We brought a variety of senior leaders together to look at the risk assessment we had pulled together, along with the internal audit plan that we were proposing, to make sure that they were agreeable to the plan, and see if they had any changes, like, well, we think this is higher risk than that, and things like that. And they did have some changes. It was a very good meeting. And so that was an addition this year that we added that I think was very positive and will continue in the future. But from a general perspective, and we kind of formatted it a little different so you could read a little better this year. So I've got two sections here. I've got just a general internal audit section and then an IT internal audit section. These are the general ones. During Q1, you can see we've done a lot of these already, but we are going to be working on the student financial aid audit, and we're going to perform 2 business office audits during this quarter. And we get a little late because the plan doesn't get approved until partway through the first quarter. So in Q2, as we ramp up a little more, we're going to continue working on the student financial aid audit for FY25. We're going to do an audit over month-end close process, cash collection processes, and 2 more business office audits. In Q3 of 25, we're going to do an audit over human resources in a variety of different areas. We're going to look at the cohort default activities in the student financial aid area, and we're planning to do 4 business office audits during Q3. And in Q4, student financial aid eligibility, evaluation of the college level funding formula, and beginning the FY26 risk assessment process. And in the IT space, and oh, by the way, I didn't mention this. We have a whole separate IT audit team that's a lot smarter than me that does all of our IT audits. That's what they do all year long. They do IT audits for organizations. And they work with Chris and his team on developing the internal audit plan, and they base it off of a federal program called NIST and what the risks are associated with colleges and universities. And so in the IT space, we're going to do an identification and authentication audit, and awareness and training. This is sort of around cyber threats. We're going to do a general IT operations audit. That's going to take us 3 quarters to get through because you have a very vast IT operations team. We're going to look at media protection. We're going to look at KCTCS's risk assessment process because under the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, you all are required to do your own IT risk assessment within KCTCS to comply with those rules. Look at your security assessment, your system and information integrity. In Q3, we're going to look at configuration management, and that's going to carry over to Q4. And we're going to look at your incident response plan in Q4. Does anybody have any questions on those? Any changes, additions, things like, did you think about this in the plan? I did have a couple pages after this for some risks that didn't quite, make their way onto the plan for the year. That's okay because, those risks would be covered elsewhere within KCTCS. We just still report them to you all. Mallory may get involved in some of the other risks that weren't necessarily on the plan.
Lance, can you talk a little bit about media protection in Q2?
Yeah, so Kate and Chris can probably talk to a little better than me, but KCTCS has a variety of data storage information across the system that has to be protected. It has to be protected from threats both internally and externally, both making sure that it's physically safe, but also safe from outside penetration over the internet, for lack of a better way to put it.
Yeah, so that's, I guess my question there is that going back to, where we've talked about all kinds of things that we need to consider. One of the things that I hear more and more of is what is our document retention policy? And, are we following disposal of data and information as is expressed by a policy? That policy is usually developed based on legal requirements or, again, regulations that are specific to keeping records for X amount of time. But do we have any of that? And would that be where that policy would fall, or where that practice would fall, would be in media protection, the disposal of data and the not
No, sir.
constantly retrieving it? Because under cybersecurity issues, that's one of the big problems that places are finding, is they didn't have any policy that said we're going to get rid of data, and therefore it was being stored forever. And when hackers got into it, your liability goes sky high. Not that I know anything about this.
So a document retention policy audit would be separate. It's something we can definitely add. I can't remember if we've done that at KCTCS in the last 3 years or not. It's one that I've done at other organizations before. I'd have to go back and look at KCTCS's document retention policy. If you don't have a policy, we would probably start with a recommendation that you need to adopt a policy. And if you've never adopted a policy before, it's arguably the most painful thing you will ever do.
Right. Well, second only to executing a policy.
Correct.
So
I'm going to say it.
President Quarles, are you familiar with anything
I
around
think
that?
Chelsea Young may have some context on this.
Yes, KCTCS is required to follow the universities and higher education records retention policies set by the Kentucky Department of Libraries and Archives. So that is set for all higher education in Kentucky. So we do follow that, and I can tell you as an update for the forensic audit is they wanted to go back 20 years and get some documentation, but we were following our records retention policy, so we were unable to provide that documentation. So there's at least that good news.
Okay.
Now that she says that, Russ, I think we may have looked at that at some point.
Okay.
Because I
just-
remember with Chair Damaris was the chair. I think she had us audit that 3 years ago, but I can go back and check. And if not, we can add it to the plan.
I think that'd be a good idea.
And Lance, if you don't mind, our team will review the proposed timeline here. If there's things that we identify, we'll be sure to contact you that may need to be added.
Please do.
Yeah.
Regent Stevens, your hand is up.
Yes, sir. Lance, in the previous slide, you had about the formula for college level funding. Can you give us a little bit more detail in the future when you get that done? Really how that is done, a better explanation so that board members can be aware of it? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anyone else? Am I missing any hands up? Okay.
We are grateful to get to work with KCTCS this year. We are nimble, we are flexible, and we can change the plan on the fly. So if anything does come up, please let us know.
Thank you. Really good work. Todd, any spaces you need to fill before we take the vote to accept this plan?
No, just the recommendation that the Board of Regents Audit Committee approve the Dean Dorton internal audit plan for fiscal year 24-25.
Okay, so we have that motion.
Yes.
Thank you. A second.
I'll second.
Thank you. And Parliamentarian Young will conduct this vote by show of hands as well.
Yeah, we'll do roll call for this one.
Gotcha.
Chair Cox,
Yes.
Regent Girdler,
Aye.
Regent McGraw,
Yes.
Regent Schaus,
Yes.
Regent Stevens, Regent Stevens,
Yes.
Regent Sutherland,
Yes.
and Regent Martin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Very good. Thank you. I'm watching the clock, 3:37, so I'm going to ask Todd if you'll provide an update on the state examination.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, that there was a state examination done that was completed on December 7th of 2023. KCTCS management reviewed the 5 findings and the 2 observations, provided our responses to APA on February 1st of 24. As of today, management has completed or implemented 4 of the findings and the 2 observations, where we still have 1 outstanding related to the system office's unrestricted carry forward balance, not accurately or transparently reported to the board. That's pending review with the forensic auditor. And once we receive that report on October 31st of 2024, we will move forward accordingly.
Outstanding. Any questions for Todd? Don't think I see any hands. So I'd like to ask Chelsea Young to provide an update on the forensic audit.
Okay, so real quickly, as Todd mentioned, they are still on track for October 31st. We are meeting with them weekly to get updates on their progress. And we have received 1 draft report, as they indicated they would provide them as they had them finished on the personnel and unit investigations. We expect to receive several more in the coming weeks. And so we can start to look at those before the final report is drafted. And they do plan to attend the September board meeting that will be able to give you a more comprehensive update.
Great. Okay. So is there any other new business that the committee needs to address?
I do have one thing if we have a moment.
We do.
We will be opening up the bylaws, the board bylaws, to update the policy and planning committee schedule. And so I wanted to bring it to the audit committee's attention if you all want to adjust your schedule, your meeting schedule at all. Right now, the meeting schedule is no less than biannually in conjunction with the regularly scheduled June and December meetings. Now, in practice, I believe we're meeting the month before every regular board meeting. So if
Right.
that's something you all want to continue, or we want to put that specifically in the bylaws, I just wanted to get some feedback from you all before we make those edits so we can do them all at once.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good point. And Lance, we'll rely on some expertise here from you and obviously President Quarles. My preference is to meet the month before board meetings because I think it's good for us as a committee to have something of robust nature to report and to understand what might be meaningful to the board with some close proximity. If we're meeting what the bylaws say we do, I'd probably recommend that we leave it as is unless there's objection or other thoughts on it. Lance, what thoughts do you have and President Quarles?
I don't know that I have a recommendation about how often you meet. We develop our plan around your meetings. And so we can be nimble based on when you all audit and move things around. I do recommend that an audit committee meet 2 to 4 times a year at least, depending on the audit activities that are occurring.
It feels like to me the environment is so volatile right now that even if we get together for 30 minutes and determine that that's all we need to do, it's probably of responsible governance at this point, and to at least be able to report to the board that we are meeting on a regular basis.
Yep.
And
Might
Mr. Chair,
also check your audit committee charter. I can't remember if it has a mandate and how often you should meet.
It's in the bylaws.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with your sentiments that just given the volume of issues that the system is facing and has faced, I'd always would err on the side of have a meeting, even if it's a progress report at this point, before throttling back.
I believe that's the consensus of the group, Chelsea.
Okay.
Let's go that way.
Thank you.
Before we call adjournment, one of my beliefs is that an audit committee needs to make certain that everybody has their opportunity to say anything they want. So Chelsea, if you would be so kind as to, of the regents, do a quick roll call. And if there's anything that you think has been left unsaid or uncovered, this is your opportunity. I know you're going to call on me. I'll go first. I think we've come a long way. Just in the time that I've been involved with the audit committee, it feels like that we've got a whole lot more accomplished and provided for leadership to lead the way that they want to lead. I thank Lance and his staff for guidance along the way on that. I think that we really need now to help accelerate progress and become one of those state-of-the-art committees, if you will, in the higher ed world. So please go ahead.
Okay. Regent Girdler, do you have anything to add?
I do not, but thank you for inquiring.
Regent McGraw?
No, I have to agree with the chair, and I'm appreciative of the transparency and the opportunity. I like, Russ, the way you're handling it, and so that people do have, do have the opportunity to engage in conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Regent Sales?
Since I'm new here, I really don't know of any other way to do it except for what I'm learning right now. So I guess keep it as is, in my opinion.
Will do. Welcome.
Thank you.
Regent Stevens?
Yes, ma'am. I have 2 items that I want to make Todd aware that about the carryover. That's a burning issue with the board, and so it needs to be addressed ASAP. And as Russ Cox said, we can't do enough about safety and security of our campuses. And we've talked about it, but we really need to find a way to, that money does not need to be an excuse why something's not done for our students. Thanks, sir.
Regent Sutherland?
Yeah, I'll just say that, alluding to Mr. Stevens, they're talking about the safety. We just had an incident here in Elizabethtown, last week. And within just a few moments, we were locked down. We were notified. Our doors were locked. We had great communication, but we've practiced this. We've gone through, we've got policies, we've got procedures, we've practiced stuff, we've gone through scenarios. And so it really went through really smooth, really cleanly. And so it's one of those things that it worked great. All the doors were locked. And so it's an attribute to our safety guys here that they did a great job. So it was good.
Well, that's great to hear. Congratulations.
And Regent Martin.
Yes, I'd like to say welcome aboard, Audra. And good to see you on here. Todd, looking forward to meeting you in a little bit here. Welcome aboard. And Lance, thank you for your report. Very thorough as always. Appreciate it.
President Quarles, you got the last say, and we're going to call for adjournment after that. So we'll turn it to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your involvement. And again, welcome on board as well. Couple things here real quick. The Fire Commission is starting their state examination. And I guess this is more of a question for Lance and Chelsea. Should that update be involved in this audit committee meetings going forward as they go through the state audit?
So my 2 cents now, Chelsea would probably be able to tell you better from a state law perspective, but I believe that any compliance audit related matter, financial statement audit, internal audit, or other regulatory type audit should be presented to the audit committee.
Good. And they're just getting started, so we'll make them informed of that. You know, I think we've got a couple things, we've got to celebrate our victories. That the audit from last year, it's almost cured. That's great. The forensic is on time. We believe it's under budget as well. So we'll have those results in as we piece all this together for our Senate Joint Resolution 179 work product. We do expect there to be another FAFSA delay this fall. We're getting word from the Department of Education that the traditional October 1st deadline more than likely will not be available for most institutions in the United States. So we're already preparing for that as well. We're very happy to have Mallory on board with risk assessment and mitigation. We're taking that very seriously. And it's interesting that Regents Audit, you talked about practicing. That's something we're going to be starting to do at PLT as well, is going through practice scenarios as we meet on a monthly basis. That's all I've got that's related to this committee, but we do have a new interim president down at Sky, Dr. Brooke Justice. And so as we get to know each other, be sure to welcome her on board. And we look forward to our regularly scheduled Regents meeting in Henderson, September 19th and 20th. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. And
If I could add
think
one thing, Dr. Quarles, the Department of Education said December 1st is their new goal on the FAFSA.
Yeah.
And they said that last year too, by the way.
Yeah.
Wow. So thank you, President Quarles. And I echo, I think the progress is evident when you look at where we are on the audit plan and where we're headed. I think it speaks to the fact that this is the most important committee of the board. And with that, I believe that this will conclude the meeting if no new business was cited. Just a reminder that just in a few minutes, we're going to start with another meeting. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the KCTCS Audit Committee of the Board of Regents.
Make a motion.
Make the motion.
We've got a motion and a second. Chelsea, I'll turn it to you.
Okay, we can do this by consensus. Is there any objection? Okay, we are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Cox.